my one piece of advice from my mentor that I cherish so much, that I always tell people that ask me about starting my own business, he told me, you never know how big that client will be. So always take the call, always see what they're like, talk to them. If they're asking you to do one room, it could turn into many rooms. But if I have that instinct that we will work really beautifully together and it's a smaller project, I always kind of take that leap of faith. And that's happened many times.
Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. I am very much looking forward to sharing my interview with Caitlin Flemming with you today. I came across Caitlin when she joined my course, the Styling Masterclass, and was instantly transfixed by her work and the spaces that she creates. She is an interior designer based in the San Francisco region of the USA, and she creates beautiful work. She has also since gone on to create two incredible books. One is called Travel Home, which is a really beautiful book, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And she is just got her second book called Sense of Place, which is about to hit shops when this episode goes live. And she's created both of them with her mother, which is an incredible story in of itself. And she goes into more about how that came to be. She is a very earthy, kind of heartfelt soul. And I really enjoyed getting to know more about her work. She really goes into detail about her design process, how she's built up her design business. She has got a small but mighty team and doing really incredible things. So I hope that you enjoy my conversation with Caitlin as much as I did. Please enjoy. Hi, Caitlin. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like this has been a long time coming, and for whatever reason, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm very excited that it is finally happening now. Okay, I want to start right at the beginning. I feel like I've got a million questions for you. I'm so curious about everything to do with you. But let's just start at the very beginning, because I think it's really interesting to kind of get an insight into, who you are, where you grew up. And I'm in particular curious about, and we will talk about your relationship with your mum, because you've created two books with her, and she seems to be her own creative force. And maybe you can kind of provide a little bit of an insight, because lots of people usually sort of say, like, I didn't have anyone creative for my family. And, so you're kind of a slightly different story. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm so happy that we finally are able to sit down together, because I do feel like it has been a long time coming on both ends. We've both tried to chat. And I remember taking your styling course many moons ago, which was so much fun and just got my creative spark going again. But to start the journey, I grew up. My mom, as most people have gathered, is my one of my best friends, and she is very creative. I grew up going to flea markets with her, and she always talks about how I would always find things at my eye level when I was, 6 to 9 years old, and she would find everything on the tabletops. So I was training my eye, and she didn't know she was training my eye at a very young age. And she was a teacher with a passion for interiors, and also on the side, it was an antique dealer. So I would help her on the weekends at her booth, pricing things, and I just have memories of her traveling to France and bringing back all these linens and her carefully washing them. So it was definitely ingrained in my childhood. Um, and I think that's where my passion began. It began at a very young age. And then she was the type of mom that, I had this beautiful bedroom that she decorated with French antiques. Um, but she was the kind of mom that when I got to the age that I wanted to experiment with my own room, she 100% let me ditch the French antiques. And I remember I painted my walls blue, my wrought iron bed lime green, and I started to make saris out of or curtains out of saris. So it was one of those completely 180, no white. I wanted no white in my room. But she let me experiment, and I think that was really an amazing thing because that just it I always say that was a part of my childhood where she let me experiment and then I came back to the other side of the neutral side of things. Um, and then we always were hunting for antiques together. We traveled a lot for my father's work, and she and I were just always together in different countries and cities, and that was one thing that we both loved to do. Um,
So
and
did you
then
grow up in, sorry, can I just interrupt? So did you grow
Yes.
up in San Francisco, and were you an only child? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, okay. Um, I'll go way back. So I was born in Washington, DC, and then my family, when I was, 4, moved to Mexico City, where, my dad grew up, was born and raised. My dad, worked for World Wildlife Fund. He was the president of World Wildlife Fund for Mexico and Central America. And so we moved to Mexico City until I was 9 years old, and we traveled a lot. My parents instilled the passion for travel that I have, from a very young age, and they always took me out of school because they figured traveling was more educational than being in school. Um, so we traveled quite a bit, and my dad would go to conferences all over the world, and my mom and I would join him. And
That
then
makes
when I was,
so much. Sorry, I was just going to say that
yeah,
makes so much sense. Then I'm already seeing so many
yeah,
threads, like the travel home book. I get
yeah,
it. Yes.
exactly. Yes. So then at 9, we left Mexico City. I actually got lead poisoning from drinking water. And, as a kid, you don't listen. And, it just had gotten a little bit dangerous. And so our family moved to Portland, Oregon, which was the complete opposite of Mexico City. And it wasn't the city it is today. And so it was a complete and utter culture shock for a kid at 9 years old. And I grew up there until I left for college, and I came to college here in San Francisco. I had an aunt
Right.
that grew up, or sorry, when I was growing up, my aunt lived in San Francisco. So I always had this vision of moving there. I always loved coming to visit her. Um, and when I came for college, I never left. I fell in love with this city. So yeah.
And so,
Um,
what did you study at college? Like when you were in those, because I think this is a really pivotal point in people's lives. When you're in high school and you're thinking about like, what am I going to do once I finish school? Am I going to go to college? If so, what am I going to study? What are the things that I'm curious about to start exploring for this next chapter of my life? What was it for you?
so I immediately went to college and studied business. So I studied marketing and international business actually. Um, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew if I had a business degree, I could go into a lot of different careers. And I figured if I had that behind me, it would be more of an asset. And I just knew I wanted to go to a bigger city. Um, and I actually fell in love with, I did a, entrepreneurship was a new thing when I was in college, and I took a few entrepreneurship classes, but they didn't really know, you know, what that would entail. All the classes kind of were like, "Oh, but you could start a business," all these different things, and I kind of loved that. I was like, "Oh, this is so cool. What could you do?" And while I was in college, this is one of the things that I am most grateful for is I was fortunate enough to work for Erica Tanoff. She's a fashion designer here in Berkeley, and I was probably the youngest person they'd ever hired. I just fell in love with her store. She traveled all over to India. Her craftsmanship is stunning, and I was surrounded by all of this incredible group of creative women who were quite older, at least 10 years older than me. And I was a shop girl on the weekends, and I just remember them all having these side businesses, having fabric lines, and um, one was a fashion designer. One loved creating a home for her family, but the way that she talked about it was so beautiful. And I just remember, I mean, they basically were like my older sisters bringing me up as I was trying to find my path. And I I always tell them when I see them around the city, like, you guys opened up a whole new world of being a creative woman and following your dreams. So that's kind of um, where they opened my eyes to be going into a creative field. And that's when I graduated. I actually graduated during the 2008 recession from college. And I found a job right away. I was lucky enough to keep the job through the recession. And I started Sacramento Street, my blog, in 2009, during the recession. And I was introduced to a whole new group of creatives. And that actually introduced me to one of my interior design mentors who persuaded me to take the leap into interior design. He saw my tiny little studio and thought I was, you know, a great designer. And he persuaded me to start working for a designer, and I did social media, and I worked on a few projects under, some senior designers, and then a few years later I took the leap into my own business. So,
Wow, interesting. I thought that it was through your mom that you kind of got into it, but so it's really interesting to hear that it was actually quite a different journey. So what was
path.
that first job? I'm just curious. That first job that you said you took when there was the recession, was that related to business or was it in that fashion area? And were you curious to do fashion because you had that exposure, or were you pulled more to interiors?
So no, I worked for a company that was actually a platform for writing, which is makes sense now. I worked in marketing, and I worked in like the community management. And we started to work with a bunch of bloggers, to create campaigns for them and that sort of thing. We were this platform for them to publish their work if they didn't want to have their own blog. And we worked on marketing out their articles, that sort of thing. And then we actually ended up when I left, we ended up getting bought by Meredith Corporation. So that's when I left and started working for an interior designer here in San Francisco.
I can already see again just so many
A
threads, like
thread.
the writing, like, because I was even thinking as I was flicking through your book before we started, and I thought, Wow, like there's not many interior designers that, because that's how I know you is as an interior designer that have, that feel confident to write a book. Lots of them get it ghostwritten or whatever,
Hmm.
and there's all these different things, and so the fact that you kind of do, you write and also. And then I remember when I got your first book and how beautifully, like you had this kind of, it came in this box with all these beautiful there was like I think a pencil and like this
Oh my gosh,
little
all the things.
yeah, like I can't remember what it, like not incense, I can't think of the right word. It was like a roller thing to, like
Oh,
you
the
could put
roller.
it for
They
your,
don't make that anymore. The
I
true
know, and it was so
botanicals.
good. Yes,
It
it
was
was so
so
beautiful. And
good.
yeah, it
I
was
know.
like
I
this thing that
wish.
you could roll onto your palms to sleep. And I used to do it for my daughters because they would say, I can't sleep, mummy. And so I used to like every night just roll it onto them to help them sleep. And I think it was just that
Okay.
psychological sort of like, okay, now it's time to sleep. It was just like that,
Oh,
like a
it's
trigger in
all
a positive
mental.
way, Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Like placebo kind of thing. Um,
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna be like, true
but
botanicals, you need to listen to this podcast and bring back the rollers.
but yeah, I mean, it's sort of like now, the fact that you sort of had worked in marketing, that that you were doing writing, that yeah, so many different threads are kind of, I'm going like ping ping. I get it now.
Uh,
I'm really really seeing that the threads kind of coming together. So
yes.
I want to
I
ask you
will.
though.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, go.
no, no, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you, so taking that leap then to starting your own interior design practice, that's that's a big decision for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of people who love interiors and they're curious about it, but they think, well, how am I going to actually make this work? What was that for you? Did you have some clients that you sort of thought you could go out and get, or were you working with friends initially, or people within your contact base? Like, how did you make that leap to kind of start your own practice and get kick-started in a way, to actually
Yeah.
start that momentum?
So I think bef- um, because I had Sacramento Street as a platform, that helped a lot to bring in people seeing my aesthetic and the way that I designed my own home, what I was doing with my own studio, and I was starting to get inquiries. So I actually didn't leave the designer that I was working for until I had enough work lined up to take the leap. I was also, to be, and I'm completely honest with everybody about this stuff. I was also, I also had marketing um, income coming in from the blog. So I knew that if I took the leap, I at least had this as a base of income that I would be getting. So I could, play around with, if I didn't get enough clients, I still had that income coming in. I still think that way, even though the design business is much bigger and it sort of runs itself and we have clients, in the pipeline and everything. But I always in the back of my mind think, okay, we also have this avenue if something happens. But I think I've always been that way. And I think most creatives have a few different things happening at the same time. That's why there's also a book, books that happen. Um, but I did have a few larger clients that took had faith in my work, and I've worked now done, that first client that I had that was really big, I've now done their home twice. Um, so and I've my one piece of advice for my mentor that I cherish so much and that I always tell people that ask me about starting my own business. He told me, "You never know how big that client will be. So always take the call. Always see what they're like, talk to them. If they're asking you to do one room, it could turn into many rooms." And so whenever someone reaches out, and now I get a lot of inquiries and they say, I know my project is very small, but I'd love to chat with you. And once I usually have several phone calls with people before we, get on board. But if I have that instinct, that we will work really beautifully together and it's a smaller project, I always kind of take that leap of faith. And that's happened many times. I've done, 4 homes for some clients that have come to me with 1 room. So that piece of advice from him was priceless.
That's really valuable because I mean I kind of get that as well, is that people coming to me that, I just got this one little thing, and for me I sort of struggle because I think, well, like I've got a family to feed, and like, is it worth me taking that kind of work on? So yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that. I want to ask you a few things about your interior design work. First of all,
Mhm.
one of the things that I hear a lot, and people sometimes I feel like it can be a little bit of an excuse. It's a fear. It's you know, like people worry, about not doing a good job. Is this idea of like that you have to have studied to be able to do interior design, which in general, I don't think you have to. I think that there are elements of it that you can outsource. I think there are people who are very good technically with, drafting and those side of things. And I think there's many different ways that you can approach interior design. There's some incredibly successful interior designers out there who haven't studied, and so I'm just curious about you and, it doesn't seem that you did specifically study, but you more learn on the job. And what's your take on that? Like in terms of like your skill level, and do you get other people in to support you for the more technical aspects, or can you shine a little bit of a light on like your process in that sense?
Definitely. I am constantly training my eye to so I didn't go to school, first of all, for interiors, but I do believe that there is an innate, um, sense of just knowing that things will work. And I always I tell people the way to learn is to just training your eye. I mean, I have I go through so many books and I read so many magazines, and I always kind of have, and I learn from different people, and I am constantly looking at buildings and taking pictures of tiny little details. And I think if you just are very detail oriented and can have a vision for what a room, like I can walk into a room and know where I need to move furniture right away to make the floor plan better. So I do feel like you have that innate. Some people don't. Some people, even some interior designers, kind of have a hard time figuring it out. But, if you have a good vision of space, and half of my visions come to me in my sleep, honestly. I wake up and I'm like, "Oh, I finally figured out what kind of baseboard we should do in this project," and I'll email my girls, and they're like, "Did that come in your sleep?" I'm like, "Uh-huh, yeah." Um, and yes, I do have a team, I have, a wonderful gal that does all of our CAD work. I I have a very people think that I have this huge team of people. There's only uh so I have 2 3 girls on the design side, and then we just hired someone for more social PR help because I can't keep up anymore with all that. So there's 5 of us in total. And no one works full time. They're all moms, they need to be with their kids, so we have kind of a flexible schedule, and I love it. And they've all been with me for years, so I cherish that so much.
And so on that, I mean, obviously, if you're paying staff, and you've got a team, you need to be charging enough for your services and getting the kind of jobs that are going to facilitate that, because, if you're sort of like paying somebody's salary and hopefully paying yourself some kind of income,
Mm-hmm.
then, which sometimes can be challenging as a creative, or reinvesting in the business and, and all of those other elements of it. How have you learned how to charge for your services? Because again, I think this is something that people really struggle with knowing, what model of charging to go with, what's your approach to it. And then, sort of being able to then recognize, well, this is the type of job or type of work I'm going to take on because, I need to do these types of job because these ones aren't going to pay the bills, in effect.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just, share a little bit of your thought or process or approach around how to charge for your services? And
Yeah.
what works well for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think there's one way to go about it, and I've tried countless different uh types of charging and all that, and then I'm like, "Oh, we lost money on this project," and that sort of thing. But it's give and take, and I think um you just really have to feel it out, and it's taken years and years, and I still sometimes question myself about how I charge, and I talk to different interior designers, and I have this group in San Francisco, and we are constantly texting each other about different things. But we, for the most part, we charge hourly. I charge hourly. And I have figured out, because I've done enough projects, how much per square foot I now bill, if that makes sense. So, like, if I know the square footage of a home that we are building, I basically know how much of I can estimate how much billable time we will take to build that project. And then I know how much time it will take to do the furniture of that project. As long as they're willing to do, you know, not 5,000 iterations of that furniture plan that we do. So those are with clients that are, very on board with our aesthetic and what we want to do. And my hourly rate, I would say I've figured it out over the years. I've even had friends tell me I need to like raise my prices already. So, and I'm like, "Oh, really? I don't know if I should." But you have to I'm like, "Am I should I be charging that much?" And they're like, "Yes, just change it in your contract now." So, you always question yourself too as a creative if you're worth that much money an hour. But it's really hard, and before I would constantly question myself when I was estimating projects. But now that we've had a few, we do ground up projects now, and we gut houses, we do just furniture projects. So now I've been able to figure out how I can charge, but it took many years to figure it out, and there's no one way. There's no one way. I've even asked other designers how they charge them. I go, "Oh no, that's not going to work for me." So I constantly question myself if I'm doing it the right way, and then I go and try it a different way, and I'm like, "Nope, back to my old way." So we each built we I work in Ivy, which is now owned by House, and we just log all of our hours into Ivy. We write down what it was for each client, and then at the end of the month we bill each client.
Yeah.
Does
And
that answer your
I mean,
question?
yeah, no, definitely. And I think that that's what I keep hearing from so many different people is that, and I've tried different things, and it really, yeah, it's challenging. I think that particularly when you're a creative person, like you just want to do a good job and you want to create your best work and you want to please your clients. But at the end of the day, like you can't, if you work for nothing or close to nothing by the time you've logged all your hours, you're kind of doing it. It's a very expensive hobby. So, it's sort
It
of,
is.
it's kind of getting the right balance between those things.
And I think if you can start to estimate, start to think about it by room. How I always start. I go, okay, we're doing these rooms. How many hours will it take me to pick out the finishes, do the elevations, you know, the conceptual phase? And then how long will it take me to do all the furniture for that? And then if you estimate by room, if you break it down that way, sometimes, it gets clients out of that like big number at the bottom that can sometimes freak them out. But if they see it room by room, it makes a lot more sense when you start to break things down. But ultimately, they're just looking at that end number. So, but it's great. And I think if if you have a seamless process and are just estimating, I always estimate a little bit over because I know something could go wrong because it always does in construction and design. There's always a delay. Um, it's great when you come under those hours for your client. And you always want them to come back. They're always going to move. They're always going to need, you know, something new in their home. So you want it to be a really nice process so that they come back to you.
I'm curious, who are your clients in terms of, are these professional people who perhaps work in finance or other areas that they don't have that confidence to tackle on a home? Are they in kind of very different industries? Or I'm just kind of curious to see, get an insight into like who are the people that are taking you on board, like, as that kind of creative for them.
Most of my clients are in the tech industry, so they're building companies. Yeah,
One of
that's
the
why a lot
benefits
of
of
my
living in San
projects.
Francisco. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I will say that is why my portfolio is not as large on my website, is because I'm not able to photograph their homes. Um, so there was a period of time where a lot of my clients wouldn't let me even take a iPhone shot of their home, and it's so hard for a creative because I'm like, "Oh, this is my canvas and this is my artwork, and I don't get to take a picture of it." But instead they were referring me to the next client, and I went through this whole group of friends of friends, and then they just kept passing me along, and that in itself is priceless. So I couldn't complain about that. But they're
I think,
all
yeah.
wonderful.
I think
But they don't have time.
referrals,
They're traveling.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously in the interior design industry, referrals are kind of one of your best marketing tools. I mean, they're kind of like the lifeblood of your business. What do you think is essential to having a happy client? How, because people have expectations about what they're getting for the service. They might not understand the process. Do you have to kind of walk them through what the process is, how much you're going to be involved, boundaries, all of those things that kind of make up a relationship with a person in terms of their expectations and the kind of the end point of the project?
I always joke that I probably I should have gone to college for a psychology because half of the time when you're an interior designer, you're also a psychologist with how they're thinking and even the husband and wife, um, like how they act together and what they want in their home. And is it the same or is it different? And all of those aspects. I mean, you're basically going in and creating this lifestyle for them and how they live, and you're picking out where they want their spice drawer, where they want their underwear drawer, where they want their all of the things. So we're creating this entire home and figuring out all these tiny aspects of their life, So I always say I probably should have gone into psychology too, because half the time and then you've got the contractors. But yeah, we go through and we talk about every phase of the project. And then we also send out a client questionnaire, and both the husband and wife have to fill it out because we want to know. I had a This is a tidbit. I had one client very early on, and she filled out the client questionnaire, and he didn't even look at it. Designed the entire house, and he came to the design meeting, and he sat down, went through the presentation, and we ended, and he said, "Oh, I don't like white walls." And I was like, "What? What? What do you mean you don't like white walls?" He's like, "Yeah, I don't like white walls. We need color on every wall." And I just took a step back and I didn't say anything. And I said, "Okay, that's great to know. Um, but your wife filled out the questionnaire and it said white wall." So from then on, I make both parties, they can do it separately, but I have to have both of them fill it out because it can vary in what one wants, the other one might not want, and I need to know that prior to designing an entire house. So lesson learned. That was one of my biggest lessons. Um,
Love it.
so yeah.
What about color? Because you have a really beautiful aesthetic. Your home is predominantly white, and do you get people coming to you who come to you for your aesthetic, or do you, because you're getting referrals, and you mentioned like with this client he wanted color, do you get people who want something very different to what is kind of your instinctive way to decorate or design? And how do you work with that? How do you work when people have got a different aesthetic to what's yours?
Yeah. I mean, very early on, I was taking on different types of aesthetics than my own just because I was trying to grow the business. Now I am more selective and I I do more my aesthetic. So it's more of the clean lines. I've been branching into just because of my love for uh the UK and all of the pattern mixing and everything. I've been branching into clients of that nature, and it's been really fun. And I have a few projects that we just photographed that I cannot wait to share. That are more pattern on pattern. And I have this one house where they wanted that it was all browns and taupes and everything, and then she threw at me, "What if could we add some red throughout the house?" And I go, "Oh." I, like, took a step back, and I was like, "It actually would look really beautiful," and I embraced it, and this home turned out so gorgeous. It's stunning. It's like a meet Miss Marple meets California, aesthetic, and I am in love with it. I can't wait to show everybody. So, mostly, it's my people come to me for my aesthetic, and it's really fun, and then I kind of push a little bit in different areas that I'm exploring with each one of them, but for the most part, I do what I love.
And can you shine a little bit of a light on your process? So somebody makes an inquiry. You said that you'll have a few conversations with them, and so when they have then made that commitment to work with you, I realize every project is different, but in general, what is your process, your design process, how you go about, like what's often your starting point with creating homes, and then maybe you can share a little bit about your kind of then your weekly process, or like how you structure your days to kind of make all that happen, particularly given that you are a mum as well and all of those things.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna start with the second question, which is how I structure my weeks and days. I feel like one of the reasons I love this job is that every single week is completely different. I mean, some days I'm at my computer and I'm going over like construction drawings, construction sets. Like this morning, I was on a lighting call with a lighting specialist for a home that we're building. Um, and then some weeks I'm in the field and I'm meeting clients and I'm at site visits and I'm at the design center pulling fabric. So that's one reason why I love this job. There's no structure to it, and I've tried to make, this is the day that Mondays are the days that I'm in the office. And then there's like 5 meetings on a Monday, and I'm out of the office all day. So now I'm just like, nope, there's no rhyme or reason. Um, and then my process is we we onboard the client, we make them fill out this questionnaire, we have them do a deep dive of any images that they have um, saved for their future home. And it could be a tiny thing like, I love this sink, I love the way that they did this detail on a wall. I mean, no clients that specific actually, but some are, and some have Pinterest boards that they already have going. We create Pinterest boards for each project and start pulling images on there that myself and my team can just pull a bunch of beautiful imagery too. And then we usually have clients sending us also images from Instagram that they've seen. Um, and then from there, we deep dive on those images and pull out any similarities that we see throughout, like a single thread. Um, and then from there, we work with the architectural drawings and we start doing elevations and start pulling the hard finishes for construction, tile, hardwood floors, any wood detailing, doors, the whole gambit. And then we go into the soft goods, which is like the furniture. So that's kind of our process. We do the hard finishes first to create the shell of the home, and then we add in what's going to be, what you're going to be sitting on throughout your home. And then from
Eh,
there, it's all the
yes.
lovely construction details
Yeah.
that take years in the making.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how do you find kind of working? Do you deal much with like contractors and trades yourself as part of that whole process? And how do you find? I mean, I'm curious because in Australia, you know, the there's a certain archetype of trade, like the personality types and all of this sort of thing. In
Oh,
terms of what you're dealing on site. I think where I live is they're quite relaxed and there's actually some really lovely guys. It's basically all. I've never come across a woman on site. But in Sydney, it can be very masculine and it can be quite rude sometimes, people that you're dealing with, particularly because I think in cities, it's all about price. So people are hiring people because of like they're, economical to deal with rather than necessarily like, they're that kind of bespoke builder that's really courteous and all of those things. How
hmm
how do you manage all of that? Do you have any of that?
so it'd be nice if every construction job we did was with the same team, but it's not. um, and my team is always really excited when we're working with certain contractors a second time, but it takes a while. I mean, you're going to be asking one of my what words describe me in a little bit, and I think one thing that my team always says when there's a fire, for instance, on a project is you are so patient and calm and you don't show a lick of being mad at what's happening. I am like, okay, I'm always trying to problem solve the what's happening on a job site. But it's not easy. I mean, you have to have a certain personality that can deal with many different types of people, and each construction job has a different set, a different group. Like there's an architect, there's a contractor, and then there's us, and then sometimes there's a project manager because the client can't be there. And sometimes actually we have become there someone on my team has become the project manager, because the client can't be there. And we've started to add those services. And then that dynamic you have to nurture and make sure everybody's on the same page and that you're getting the edits for everything. And we all need to know the schedule. And some contractors don't like a schedule, but we like schedule. So it's just all of the different avenues that could happen on these projects. And it's not easy, but you have to be super flexible and know that. I always tell myself, I'm like, okay, it's never going to go to like nothing's going to go according to schedule. So we just have to kind of be flexible. As I tell my kids, you have to have flexible thinking. So that's what I always tell myself too now. Swear I'm going to write a children's book about flexible thinking, but it's actually for myself.
Love that. I can think of one of my children in particular that could really do with that, because everything's about being fair and everything's going to be a particular way,
Oh,
and which I think she gets that from
I
me
know.
sometimes. And I'm like, anyway, another story for another
Isn't it
day. But
isn't it funny when you
and I'm
see
curious.
the threads of yourself in your children?
Oh, it's yeah, it's very eye-opening sometimes.
I
Now,
know.
as you say, I mean, there are so many different elements to working in interior design, from the creative side to, knowing how to run schedules, to people management, to psychology, to, all of these different things. I mean, then there's the styling at the end, and obviously, as you mentioned, you invested in doing my course, the styling masterclass. And I'm just curious, have you invested in other, you say you love reading books and magazines, and you kind of train your eye and learn in that way, but have you kind of taken on like a business coach or any other thing to sort of help you with your business? Or is it really just learning on the fly and just learning as you go along?
Yeah, it's just learning as I go learning as I go along. I have thought recently about potentially bringing someone on to see what could be next. It's funny, people ask me, do I want to grow the business? Do I want to get bigger? What do I how do I want to scale? And then I think of my lovely team and I go, "No, we're good. I'm good where we are." Because I love, we all work so well together. We now have like this whole system in place. I have a girl that does all of our procurement and ordering. I have another girl that does all of our construction jobs and is on schedules for that. And then I have my girl that does all the CAD work. And then, as I said, I brought on a social media person recently, and she is helping me with that. So it's funny. No, I haven't brought on somebody, but it's in the back of my mind, and I have thought about it. But then with book number 2 launching, there's no time.
Completely understand.
um,
Well, yeah, that brings us nicely into, because that was the next thing I wanted to ask you, is then how have you managed to find the time in amongst all of this to create not just one but two books, and books where, and I know, like, I was looking through your latest one, and like there's a lot of travel involved, and even just the travel component, there's a lot to organize in terms of I mean, I don't know if you've done that all yourself. I've had to do that all myself for mine. It's like finding where you're going to stay and booking the flights and how to get from the airport to the location, and like creating the schedules, and everyone's like, all the different people. Like, you've got a lot of homes that you've shot. How have you, and then that is not even to mention the writing and the proofing and that all of the things that go into creating a book. Because I think the first time you don't realize, and then like the next time you know what you're in for. So how have you managed to?
Because now I'm reliving it again, and I'm like, it's like planning a third wedding. I mean, just it's so funny. So with Travel Home, we were my I co-wrote it with my mom, who is an amazing writer and interviewer. I mean, she's a true historian. I feel like she teaches history. Um, she's so great at researching all of the people that were in both Travel Home and Sense of Place, which is coming out in September. Um, and without her, I would not have been able to do both of these books. Um, and Travel Home really came about where she and I it was Christmas break. She was about to turn 60. She was, we were talking about her hitting this milestone, and I said, "What is there anything you want to do? Like, we were talking, and she goes, I have always wanted to write a book." And I go, "Oh, what would you write it about?" And she goes, "I don't know, but it just would have to be something that I love, that I'm passionate about." And we just that was the starting off point to us brainstorming, and we started thinking, and travel and interiors came to mind, and we go, what if we did interior designers and how travel influenced them in their home, and but would these designers even say yes to us photographing their home? It snowballs into, yeah, right, we will never get into that person's home. And then it snowballed, and we started to reach out to designers before we even had a book deal, which was really funny because they like, we're pitching this idea. We don't have a book deal, but we will. Don't worry. Um, so yeah, that's how Travel Home came about, and then we chatted with a bunch of different designers and got them to do interviews before we pitched the book to publishers. We chatted with Vicente Wolf. We chatted with Erica Tanoff. I mean, all of these amazing designers that I had looked up to for so many years and had studied their work. So that's when we got an agent and started pitching it out, and then signed with Abrams Books. And they loved our idea. They were the only publisher that didn't want to change our book idea, which I'm sure you are familiar with. And yeah, it was a jumping off point. And then we realized we had to create the book in 9 months, which seemed really quick. And we had to travel to all these beautiful places, but I mean, at with Travel Home, I thought it was a once in a lifetime experience. Now that I've gotten to do it twice with my mom, is incredibly special. And this time around, my daughter, my son, how old was he? I can't remember. Now my kids are a little bit older, so they've seen, they were older when I created Sense of Place, so they remember and they love looking at things. And whenever they see Travel Home in shops, they're like, "Mom, it's your book." And then I'm like, "Shh, you don't need to announce it." So it's fun to see their excitement. So yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
it's
Sense of
that book is
Place.
done. Yeah, it's done so well, and it's yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful book. I treasure it, the copy that I have, and
Oh,
like I said, just having had a quick flick through Sense of Place, that's equally beautiful. What I was curious about Sense of Place is there's a very I would call it like a bit of an English aesthetic, like a traditional, like you sort of
Hmm.
mentioned it a little bit earlier on with some of the interiors that are in there. And I'm curious about, what are you drawn to about, you mentioned earlier even saying that you kind of love that English aesthetic. What are you drawn to about that kind of aesthetic, where we're talking about the kind of the patterns and use of
Hmm.
textiles and fabrics and color, but not in a bright kind of way. I'm just curious, for the girl who grew up in Mexico City,
Yeah.
uh, like what's the
Who
appeal
is
for
always
you?
trying to find the brown color in the markets, which doesn't exist. Let me tell you, I bought my daughter one dress that has, like a taupey color, and I've never been able to find it since. But sense of place, I think, when we were researching designers that we wanted to feature and highlight for this book, I mean, it came out of a passion, or it came out of, you know, my mother and I being home with, in COVID, and we were really cherishing our surroundings and our homes and the little details that make a home for each person. And when we've been very inspired by people in the English, countryside, like Penny Morrison and Carlos Sanchez Garcia. I mean, to even get to say you've been to Penny Morrison's home is crazy. I still pinch myself that we drove all the way to Wales, which was quite an experience. Um, and then staying with her for three days to shoot the home was one of those pinch me moments. But yeah, I think all of the homes have this collected homey feeling, because also I think all of these homes had been lived in for we were going into these homes almost, right out of COVID. And even some of them, there were crazy travel restrictions, and we didn't know if we'd be able to get from place to place as quickly as we wanted. So yeah, they all have this like layered, cozy feeling, but there's also some like Laura and Nora from Design Tales. They have a very pared down, clean aesthetic, but yet their walls are beautifully, plastered, and it's actually the old plaster that was on the walls, and they took off the paint that was previously there. So yeah, there's this homey feeling to the whole book, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it is a kind of, in that sense, like quite a post-COVID book, in terms of, or post-pandemic, that, yeah, there's this beautiful coziness. And there are obviously still interiors in there that are more reminiscent of, I think, travel home, with, the sort of, like the white walls and the wood detailing, and, the beautiful kind of
Hmm.
pared back aesthetic as well. And so it's a beautiful mix. But I was curious, like, oh, there's quite a few of that kind of more traditional English style. And I particularly
Yeah.
when you started mentioning about growing up in Mexico City and all of those kind of elements, I was like, wow. I was just curious because for me, I actually grew up in England, so it's almost like, and maybe this is for you. For me, I kind of feel like a resistance to that kind of aesthetic because I was surrounded by it. You know what I mean? But whereas, and maybe you're like that with the color of Mexico. It's like, well, like that's why
I
you're
think that's
drawn
why I'm
so much.
so pared down.
Yeah. And that's for me, I think, with the English thing is that, I grew up like I remember we had a pink velvet sofa with like gold detailing and gold tassels and things, like that was the aesthetic that I grew up with. And like green carpet, but like a kind of muted green, but still, like, and wallpaper on every wall. And yeah, it's like I've definitely moved away from that. So it's a fascinating, isn't it? I mean, that's why I always say, like, with people's styles, how I think it's so much about like your journey and your story and your experience, because we've all been on such different journeys. What about for you? Like, how would you describe your style?
Oh yeah. Well, I will say this is a funny story. when we photographed travel home, I think I was so excited about all these amazing designers that we, were photographing. It was almost as though my home went through a midlife crisis because we would go to, uh, let's say, Kendra Smoot's home, and I'd be like, "I need to get rid of everything. I need to add, like, nature in my house." And then we'd go to Nate Berkus. I'm like, "Ooh, I love the way he styles all," I was taking little tidbits, bringing them back, and unfortunately, my home was the last home we photographed. And so I had to take a step back and recalibrate my aesthetic and what I loved. So it was funny because I wanted to see if that was gonna happen with Sense of Place, and it didn't happen like it did with Travel Home because I think I knew, like, "Don't go there, Caitlin, like, that happened once before." And with Sense of Place, it was more of finding the treasures in the countries that I thought fit my aesthetic and my home that I wanted to bring back and give a new life to because I collect a lot of antiques, and so that was a funny experience going from one book to the next and seeing what would happen. But I would say my aesthetic is very serene and comfortable, and I mix a lot of patterns together that are neutrals and blues, and I take a lot of inspiration from my surroundings being in nature and by the water. And that is something that I truly love. So there's a lot of blue in my home, lots of greens. Uh, so yeah, that's I love to I mix a lot of antiques into our house, and I am always constantly telling the kids, they'll be bouncing on a chair, and I'm like, so just so you know, that chair is 100 years old. Let's make it last another 100 years for the next people that want to be the stewards of that piece. And they always give me this look like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I always, am telling them, where the pieces are from and trying to educate them, so it's quite funny. And Amelia, my daughter, loves to go antiquing with me, which is really fun, especially since I started at a young age. She is constantly looking for treasures to bring into our home, and it's so fun to see her find something that she knows I'll love, and then we put it in the house, and she just adores it. So, yeah.
What would you say to people who, want to or have antique pieces or want to buy antique pieces or, pieces with a sort of story and provenance and how to mix those into their own homes? Because this is something that I hear people say a lot and they struggle with of, like, how do I make these pieces, you know, from different styles work together, or how do I make antiques work in with my home? What's your take on that, and how do you do that in your own home and maybe for clients as well? What do you think
Mhm.
is helps that process blend?
Yeah. I That's a good question. I mean, I think I just find for myself, I find pieces that I really love and I know will pair well together. Like the woods work well together of these tables. Or I know, I actually get this question quite a bit from people when I'll be antiquing and I'll be with friends and I pick up a piece and they're like, "Oh, well, where are you going to put that?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I know I love it and I'm going to find a spot for it. I might not know where it's going to go yet, but it'll either go in my home or I will find a spot for it in a client's home or, it might sit in my office for 5 years. And then I finally find the perfect project for it. So I don't necessarily know, where a piece will go when I purchase it. And sometimes I purchase a piece thinking it will go into a client's house and then it's in my own home because I bring it home and then I see, "Oh, that actually looks quite good there." But I think if you just start the process of collecting things, and you don't have to put it anywhere in your home, but start to figure out it's trial and error. I've done it myself where I've bought something and I go, "Oh, that does not look good," and I still do it. Um, and so I think it's a lot of trial and error, and sometimes you make mistakes, and that's fine, but just starting to train your eye in what you love, and what you're attracted to will start to curate the rest of your home, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Before I go on to the final questions that I asked everyone, I just want to ask you one more question because you've now created two books. And I know for me, when I create my books, I learned so many lessons. Like that experience, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit of stepping into other people's homes who are really kind of like at the top of their game. Like these are people who are, industry leaders, they're highly respected, they've got a wealth of experience and knowledge. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from stepping into these homes? Because I think it was quite profound for me. I mean, obviously, I've been reflecting on it a lot, and it's informed my subsequent books, and it's informed my courses and so many of the things that I do. But I'm just curious, have you sort of come away from creating those books and sort of really learned some kind of valuable lessons?
Yeah. I mean, so I think actually the lesson I learned, that's a really good question. So there was one lesson I learned creating sense of place, and I don't know if this was because of the pandemic and everybody was so so when we traveled to shoot the book, everybody was so incredibly welcoming, and I also felt as though this isn't like an interiors, lesson that I learned, but I took away the fact that all of these designers were not in a rush for us to photograph their homes. They really wanted to sit and talk with us, and they wanted us to learn about them, and they were welcoming, and we we were just welcomed with open arms, I should say, into each of their homes, and it taught me to kind of slow down in the way that I work sometimes, and uh, finding the beauty within each space, so we weren't rushed from room to room, and you need to be out in a few hours and that sort of thing. And this actually was the most in the UK is they some people offered us to stay for days if we wanted to, and Penny Morrison insisted that we stay for a few days. I didn't realize how big her house was when she offered us to stay. But yeah, that was one of the lessons I brought back, was to take every moment and cherish it. Is that answering your question?
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
no, I just, yeah, I don't know. I do think, I mean, I think I know for me, I feel like when I step into people's homes, I learn so much about a person by their home. Like, and even the way that they welcome you into their home, the way that, like
Yes.
some people are incredibly welcoming, incredibly hospitable. They want to spend like shadow you the whole time. Other people are like, okay, there you go, this thing, we're out, like, and it's so
Yeah.
different. And I just find that fascinating because I'm just fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by, how we live and how we live differently and the choices we make and the different personality types and how that's expressed in
It's
people's
so
homes.
true.
And I'm like, as an observer, I mean, my background is journalism, so I'm just endlessly curious about that and kind of getting those insights into people.
I
So
mean,
yeah,
it
for me
was
that's been really interesting.
yeah, it was truly amazing when we went into the homes, especially in Europe. It was a completely different experience where they had everything ready, like, everything was ready for you, and also their hospitality was to a whole new level that in the US is a little bit more forgotten, and you're not as prominent, and they'd have, like, water ready for you. "Would you like tea?" They would check in on you. "Do you need more tea?" All of these, like, "When do you want lunch? Do you want lunch now? Do you want, like," all of these different things, and I was like, "Oh." And so when I came home, I was like, "Okay, I am like, when we have people over, it's gonna be a whole new thing now
Lots
where
of
we
tea.
no, and just like the spreads that they created for lunch and the meals were so beautifully thought out. And it was just so nice to feel welcomed in that way. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's also like people have an appreciation of you traveling, you've got on a plane, you've traveled overseas, you've come a long distance. So I do think that plays into it a little bit because I mean, I've kind of noticed a similar thing, like in terms of in Australia, it tends to be, okay, there's the keys. Can we just do a
Yeah,
quick portrait and like, we're out of here. We've got to go and do X, Y, Z, that kind of thing versus, like I remember when we went
totally.
to one of the homes in Germany and it was like, this amazing lunch and there was like we were sitting outside under the tree and all of these having a glass of wine at the end and
Yeah.
all of these kind of things, which is a very different
The
experience.
hour-long lunch where, you know, I was like, "Oh, I need to do this more often." But yeah,
I'm actually
it's
going to ask
funny.
you. I'm actually going to ask you one more question before we get onto the final ones, because I
Yeah.
was, obviously occupational hazard. I was like, oh, the book's beautifully styled, and so obviously when you step into people's homes, these are the homes of interior designers. They are beautiful, they're considered, they're thoughtful, but there is, when you're creating a book, you need to style the shots for the book. You need to style the shots for photography. And so is that do you do that, or does your mum get involved in that? And I'm curious about what you've learned about that process as well.
Yeah. Um, so mainly I do all the styling for the books in but we try to keep it as close to what we walked into, but it just depends on what angle we were trying, which angle, the lighting, that sort of those details. But I definitely talked to the homeowner, the designer, I should say, not homeowner, beforehand and ask them how comfortable they are with us cleaning up a few things, changing things. Some people not so much into it, and then we would know, like, don't touch anything, and then some have fun, move whatever you want, and so we would have fun with changing up a few things, cleaning off. I've never, you vacuum, you do all the things, um, so yeah, I would mostly style, and then our photographer, Stephanie Russo, who's amazing to work with and like a sister to me, uh, she has an iPad, and so we would work off the iPad and we'd fine tune tiny details, and we would then work with my mom to see if she caught everything because we always called her like the eagle eye. She'd always find some. We'd think we'd have the perfect shot, and then she'd say, "Huh, that's overlapping on that. So if you could move that a few," and the last little look through, and she'd perfect it. So we'd have, 6 set of eyeballs on each photo. But it's really fun to do all together. And it's fun going into all these homes and, playing with all of their accessories and learning how to style each different aesthetic.
Yeah, yeah, it's
That's the beauty of it.
yeah, I mean, it very much is. I think that's where it very much becomes about that kind of idea of visual storytelling. You're using their pieces to kind of tell their story in a way, and bringing in plates or whatever it might be, or those different accessories to kind of paint the picture a little bit of what it's like if they had just stepped out of the room. So Yeah, it's
Hmm.
it's a beautiful skill in that kind of sense. All right,
Yeah.
let's get into the final questions that I
Yeah.
ask each guest. And the first one is you've touched on already. Which 5 words best describe you?
Say creative, kind, calm, hardworking, and a treasure seeker. Does that count as two or
That's fine. We'll accept that.
constant? I'm constantly on the hunt for things.
Do you edit your spaces a lot because you're adding things to your spaces? Do you kind of be conscious
I'm
of
constantly moving thing pieces around. I would say in this, so we've lived in this house almost 3 years. We moved in COVID. Um, and I would say with this home, it has a lot more space, so I don't have to I keep filling in because we didn't have as much when we moved into the space. So I'm constantly layering in artwork and different little pieces. But then half the time I, need a piece for a client project and I'll take it from my own house. My husband comes home and he's like, "Where'd that piece go?" I'm like, sold it. Sorry."
what's the best lesson you've learned, or one of the best lessons you've learned in life,
My
business,
parents,
whatever?
yeah, my both my parents taught me to do what I love because then it doesn't feel like work. So I definitely love what I do on a daily basis. And I think that's why I actually do so many different things because I don't like to be bored. Maybe that's the Gemini in me.
What's your proudest achievement?
Mm, probably I know this sounds, you probably get this a lot, but my kids, I love showing them that they should enjoy the the beauty of the everyday life and to follow their dreams no matter what they are.
So, who inspires you?
So I think that it's not a it's not a person that inspires me, but I truly love to travel and I think that is why we created both Travel Home and Sense of Place. Is the people that we shot in the book inspired me throughout my career, and bringing being in those homes was like a dream come true, pinch me moment. And to be able to talk to um, Penny Morrison in person and sit in her living room and have her dog on my lap during the interview was so incredible. And I still can't believe that it happened. And even going to Carlos Sanchez Garcia's house and being greeted by them at their gate and having to navigate the streets of Norfolk was quite crazy. And then even um, Jill Sharp Weeks is a huge inspiration to me in creating these beautiful homes across the country. And the details that she puts into her spaces is truly incredible and so well thought out. And the pieces that she creates from multiple different creative fields is something that I've always loved and cherished about her design work. So that's why we create these books, is because then I get to meet them all.
I
I'm
can
sure you do
relate.
that too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like
What?
why else would I do it?
yes. What are you passionate about?
Mm. Uh my family is so important to me. I didn't talk too much about that when you asked me about my schedule and my day to day, but I my whole entire day is crafted so that I can spend as much time with them as possible. And I always drop them off at school. I try to be there for pickups, and then I become a chauffeur for the afternoons. And so I love being a mom to them, and showing them the beauty of the world. And I will say, creating a home uh, for them to always want to come back to and to live in and to not worry about jumping on the sofa or jumping from the ottoman to the sofa or throwing a football in our house. I just love that they get to create these memories in such a beautiful space.
Yeah, no,
And
beautiful.
writing.
Yeah. What dream do you still want to fulfill?
Oh gosh. Um, I a textile line I would be
Ooh.
my answer. I've been gathering inspiration and textiles for years, and the piles are getting very big of vintage fabrics that have brought me inspiration, and I would love to conquer that dream. We'll see if
Wow,
that
I can
happens
see that.
with
I can see
everything
that.
happening.
Yeah. What are you reading? What's on your bedside table or your coffee table at the moment?
My new favorite coffee table book is Create by Ali Heath. Stunning. I love her books. She's just so incredibly talented, and I take so much inspiration in her books, like your books. Um, and then on my nightstand, I'll be honest, I read a lot when I go on vacation or holiday. And so they're kind of quick, fast reads that I can read 5 pages and put down if a kid wants me to jump into the pool or go into the lake. So I just finished Happy Place, um, and then I'm currently reading Pineapple Street and Lessons in Chemistry. I'm
Hmm.
like going back and forth between those two.
What are you listening to? Do you listen to podcasts or and if not, do you listen to music? What do you like to listen to?
Yeah. Uh, I love I love podcasts. I listen to yours all the time. And then I also love Business of Home. I think he interviews some great people. I love the piece that he did with Studio Ashby. And then the Interior Collective is another podcast that I listen to. And music. Um, my son is obsessed with Imagine Dragons, and so we constantly have that on in the car. So that's on rotation.
It could be
He
worse.
really
Trust
wanted
me. It could be worse. Some of the things that
it
one of
could
my
be worse,
daughters
right?
finds. Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Anyway.
oh, I know. There's some where, I actually he'll tell me a new song that is he listened to in a carpool to soccer or something. And I put it on and I go, "Yeah, let's go back to Imagine Dragons." And the worst part is that he's had this obsession for years, and then last fall, they were here in the Bay Area, and I'm not a concert goer, and I didn't even know that they were coming, had come, and then I was at tennis with a few girlfriends, and they were talking about how they'd just gone with their sons, and I couldn't believe that I didn't know about it. I was like, "He would've gone crazy, and I missed it." But maybe it's for the best.
Yeah. He can, I'm sure there'll be other opportunities.
I know, I made the mistake of telling him, and then he made
Oh.
me look up the schedule of where they were going, and then they're in Paris this summer, and he's like, we should go to Paris, Mom." And I was like, "I wish. Actually, sign me up for that trip because I might take you." So,
And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Mm. Make a career out of what you love, which I've done. Um, that's probably my biggest one, but also don't compare yourself to anyone else. Um, I don't do it often, but sometimes, with social media, it happens and you see people's lives, but that's a good one. And then I think the thing that I've always said to myself, even now, is the simplest gestures can make somebody's day, like opening up a door, the littlest gesture can make somebody's day. And I always think about that.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's so nice. And I'm just curious, because I can see that, you are a very calm sort of person. Do you think that's just innate, or do you have like tools or things that you kind of say to yourself to kind of just ground yourself so that you are calm and patient? Speaking
I
from
think
somebody who's not,
not.
not patient. Any tips?
I do think it's innate, but I also think that I have created a balance for myself when things go whenever something happens, I tend to or I get stressed out, I tend to take a pause from what I'm doing and I go take my dog for a walk or I go out in nature or I take a bike ride or do something that isn't what's stressing me out, and then I think because I calm myself down, then I'm able to regroup and think about how to create a solution. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not always calm because, sometimes my kids go crazy, but,
That's just life. Yeah. I
yeah,
think
when they
I've
say no
definitely
1,000
improved.
times.
Yeah. I've definitely improved over the years. I do think it's something that comes with age, and it's, your children can push you to the limits, but I think also it gives you the gift of patience because you just have to be. It's just like that. It's like that muscle
Yes,
you have to exercise. Like you're just doing it all over and over and over again. So I think that you just learn that you have to be patient, otherwise you will go crazy. So anyway, that's my experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that happens, yeah, with age, I guess. I've always been kind of a calm person, so I guess it's just the way I am.
Yeah, no, it's a gift. Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we finally were able to have this conversation and learning all the things about you and your beautiful books and your process and all that you create in the world. So thank you so much, Caitlin. I'm really excited about this. And can you just want to share again about when your book is out and the names of your books as well?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me and welcoming me. I feel so honored to be a part of this series and travel home and sense of place will be out September 19th. So a month. Ah, here goes the crunch time, everybody. It's like planning a wedding, I swear.
And what about how can people connect with you and see more about your work?
Yeah, my website is CaitlinFlemming.com, and you can connect with me and ask me any questions via Instagram if that's easier, and it's at Caitlin Flemming.
Great. And we'll, of
Feel
course,
free
put
to
all those.
send any questions my way.
Great. And we'll put all those links in the show notes as well. So thank you again. And yeah, really excited to share this with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.